noon. After, I want to welcome you all to the first Belfast Garden Club program of 2023. And we will pass out at the end some bookmarks that have all the programs on them so that you can see them all. My name's Susan Connard. I'm the program co-chair for the Garden Club. Barbara Bell is the other co-chair. I don't know if she's here or not. And I would like to introduce our first speaker of this season, which is Kate Garland from University of Maine Extension. And she will be talking to us on planting for pollinators, and will also give us some information on the Pollinator Friendly Garden certification program. For those of you who are on Zoom, and I think there are quite a few, please hold off on putting things in the chat until the presentation is over, and then we'll take questions from the room while you're putting your things in the chat. That just avoids having these little boxes pop up all the time, which are very annoying. So take it away, Kate.
Great. Well, thank you, Sue. First of all, before I forget, is my volume okay for the people in the room? I will try to maintain this volume. If you could, those of you in Zoom, just quickly, just one person in the chat, tell me if the volume's okay or not okay. Or if it's not okay, please put that in the chat.
They're saying okay.
Yeah, okay. We're good.
Thumbs up.
Okay, great. So before we get started, I just want to bring your attention to the Injustice for All poster that was at the beginning of the slideshow. I think it's actually one that we're required to display on our presentations. I'll let that get back up on the screen in just a moment. It's a direct message from our federal funder who wants to be sure that you know you have a right to access the program and an accommodation if necessary. If you have any questions or concerns, we hope you let us know. If you have any concerns that you want to direct to the federal government, the contact information is over there. So that housekeeping item said, I want to thank Sue and the Belfast Garden team for inviting me. It's quite an honor to be on the docket, and it's really fantastic what you all do to promote educational programs for the community. It's a lot of work. So I want to give them a round of applause because I know they were very busy for certain last week, ironing out all the tech details. There's a lot that goes into organizing these lineups, and you did secure a really fantastic lineup. So I do hope you grab a bookmark, and those of you that are online, consider looking at their programs. I was saying to colleagues last week, actually, that I now know what it's like to be the opening act for a big rock show, because you may have noticed that Dr. Doug Ptolemy is on the list. If you could advance the slide. Dr. Doug Ptolemy is one of the most well-respected entomology and wildlife ecology communicators of our time. So I am kind of like playing the harmonica before he comes in. I don't want to underestimate what I'm going to be talking to you about today, but it'll be a fun talk. But I want to lean on him to tell the story, the entomology side of things and the ecology side of things. He does a beautiful job telling the story of really fun little anecdotes that are happening in nature all around us, and shows a deep look on those things, but also beautifully translate that to the bigger picture of what we can do in our own managed landscapes, whether it's commercial or home landscapes, to really make a difference. What I will do is take a more horticultural approach to the topic. I am a plants person. I got a degree in botany and a master's degree in horticulture, and I come to the topic from the native plant side of things, and I have a deep love of native plants. So I'll talk about that and share it through the lens of our Pollinator Friendly Garden certification program, which some of you in the room, raise your hand if you actually have had your garden certified through our program. So a couple of folks, maybe you could lean on those folks later on after the meeting to get your perspective on the application process and any tips that you might have along the way. And those of you on Zoom, I encourage you to write in the chat if you've actually got certified or not. And hopefully I can encourage some of you to consider certifying your garden space as well. Here, can I have the next slide here? Oh, my other one disappeared. Well, there was a slide, a little picture on the, oh, there it is. It's a video actually, and I don't know if the technology will let us play it or not, but it's a neat video showing the value of pollinators in our food crops, which we all know they play a crucial role in ensuring that most flowering plants are able to propagate themselves from seed. And so if we can try clicking on that video, I'll talk you through what's actually happening. You hover over that one. No, it'll work. Does it give you the option to play it? Okay. Well, I'm gonna just have you close your eyes or virtually close your eyes and think about what's happening in your squash patch. So this is a squash flower. Many of you may know that squash flowers are either male or female. The females will actually have what looks to be a small mini fruit at the base of the flower. That's how you know it's a female. It's the one with the ovaries, just like our own bodies. The females have the ovaries. And then the male will just have a pollen, a little nub with pollen on the outside of it. And the video shows the male and the female flowers side by side and the bees moving from one to the other. The bees are going into the nectaries of the female flower. That's kind of the lure to get the bees in, and it's going over and going to the male flower, getting the pollen, then going back and forth to collect all its food. That's just one of many moments in the garden that I hope you all have either experienced or take some time next season to experience, because it's fascinating. And then beyond our own food sources, pollinators are essential to creating food for our wildlife as well. And I cannot underestimate the value that pollinators play in that role as well. But beyond feeding us and our wildlife, pollinators are key to ensuring that the plants themselves are able to successfully reproduce and allow those plant populations to continue. So I'm preaching to the choir. I won't linger too long on this. And again, Dr. Ptolemy will tell some really fascinating anecdotes about the deeper implications there, but they're incredibly important. Next slide, please. So additionally, many of the pollinators themselves actually serve as a food source. They are the ones that are capturing energy from the plants. Plants are getting the energy from the sun, and they serve as the vessel to bring that energy, transfer that energy up the food chain. So, you know, one big example is birds. If you've ever read any of Dr. Ptolemy's books, he talks a lot about the different roles that pollinators and caterpillars in particular play in the overall health and ability for birds to survive, and the precarious state that that's in actually. So, you know,
Kate, excuse me. You may think you are showing slides. You are not. You've never moved beyond your first slide. I sent you a text to that effect, a chat, but I don't think you read it. So I'm butting in right now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We can pause for a sec. So we.
What happened to me?
How about that?
Are you seeing a picture of a bird with a caterpillar in its mouth now?
Yes, we are now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for chiming in. I'll show you the cute picture of the, oh, maybe I forget that I'm not on the, you are not. It's like doing something in the mirror. Go. So we all set? Okay, so we're going to go to the next slide. Pretty Aster. The next one.
And I don't know why it's not going on the screen.
Technical brand.
There.
Yeah.
No,
That's the one she wants.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So we'll keep it right there. That works for me. Totally. So friends on Zoom, you can see a picture of our sign, our certified pollinator friendly garden sign with a purple flower on it. I assume
I'm
yes.
not answering.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So, back in 2018, we at the University of Maine Cooperative Extension, we were excited to learn about a pollinator friendly garden certification out of Penn State that was both encouraging and celebrating gardeners that were doing a great job. But it was also what we liked the best as educators was the fact that it was a great educational tool. It was like a checklist for gardeners that were interested in the topic, but overwhelmed with the giant books and resources that were out there. So it was kind of like a checklist, like I said. So we wanted to adapt that and use it in Maine, and Penn State was very generous in letting us do that. And so in 2021, we launched the certification. And if you were in that first phase of it and checked out the application, I encourage you to check back if you were, overwhelmed by it, because we revised our application quite a bit in 2022, and it made it significantly less challenging to kind of get through the certification process. So it was a great success. We have a tremendous team of volunteers and staff behind it. I put volunteers first because they really are truly the backbone of the certification program. They've reviewed our applications, they've reviewed the applications that come in, but they were really key in helping us get the application going. So what I want to do is, if we could take a moment and go online and go and just peek at the website that is where you can find the application. I'm really putting Drew on the spot. Big kudos to Drew. If you're at home and trying to remember where this will actually be emailed to anyone that registered for the program. But if you just Google UMaine Pollinator Friendly Certification, it will come right up. And the website itself has information on the 4 main requirements that are part of the application. There we go. On the left-hand side, if we scroll down a little bit, there we go. If you put your mouse a little bit further, there we go. You can see here, step 1, step 2, 3, 4, and then the application.
Not working for at home of the Zoom again.
Oh dear. So I won't linger too long then. Oh, there we go. Does that work now? Can you see a website?
That's working.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm really counting on you guys to chime in. So you can see that we have the various steps for the certification process, but I'm just going to jump into one step: provide food, just to give you an idea as to how we build in some educational resources into each of those pieces, because food, our plants are really an overwhelming topic, an exciting topic. But if we keep scrolling up, here we go. You can, it answers some of your first questions that might come to mind, is where can we find pollinator friendly native plants, resources for selecting pollinator plants. So these are some giant rabbit holes to dive into and have a great time looking at. And this is the best time of year. Let's say that's the thing about the snow that we have around it. Obviously, we want to enjoy the outside as much as possible, but there are many great days to sit by the fire and check out these various resources and think about what you want to have in your garden this time of year. And then more about larval host plants as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means in just a moment, but that's just a snapshot of one aspect of our website. I'm just going to have Drew jump in. If you can scroll up just a little bit more, actually that way.
Which?
Scroll down, I should say. Sorry. And even further down, I want to go over to the applications. Applications for certification right up there. And scroll so you can see that. When you're ready, or even before you're ready to actually apply, you can click on the Pollinator Friendly Garden application. And if you just click on that PDF, it should open up as a website. There you go. And you can either, this is a fillable PDF, but if you have trouble with that, you can handwrite it in. And it walks you through the whole process. So when you're ready to get your garden certified, it gives you each of the steps, breaks it down, and gives you a checklist of like suggested plants for the different times of year. And then a checklist of the other expectations regarding safeguarding pollinator habitat, providing water resources, and shelter as well. So it's really, again, a cool guide for folks to work on. And I encourage, we always welcome questions as you're going through. You may have questions that we hadn't anticipated, and also suggestions for improving the application for different iterations. Yes.
I wondered if it's the kind of form where you can fill in part of it and save it and go back to it, or do you have to fill the whole thing out?
I think you have to, well,
No, you can save it and go back.
yeah, okay, thank you. I haven't been in that recently to know if that's been fixed or not, but
Because I think knowing that, people might be more willing to use the online form. Otherwise, if you're gonna have to keep track, writing it down might be easier.
honestly, yeah, you can download it. For me, I still go back to printing it and jotting down notes and then putting it on. For something like this, it might be good to do it that way, just in case things go off.
So can I make a quick comment?
Yeah,
You scrolled through all the different seasons, but I think one of the most important points is that to have a good pollinator garden, you have to have some things blooming all through the season. So one of the keys in the application, and it was sort of up there, is that they break it into 3 seasons, and you have to have a certain number of plants in each season so that there's basically pollen and fruit and whatever available kind of all through the season.
yeah, that's a perfect segue. Perfect segue. It's like he had planned this, so thank you. And I will step back, and at the end, I'm actually going to share with you my garden that I'm hoping to have certified, and step back from my role on the committee, and maybe I'll even put in a fake name for mine so they don't know who it's from. But I plan to certify my garden. And the story that I'll tell is that it's not as complicated as it seems to be too. So anyway, that'll be your teaser to stay focused today. So can we jump back into the presentation itself? And then I'll go step by step. I'm keeping you on your toes. I think it'll probably be smooth from here on out, not too many side steps. And again, Drew, thank you. If it was my husband over there, I don't know if it would be nearly as patient, so. That's good. He's a good guy. So requirements for certification, it's 4 basic categories. You're looking at food. And as Sue mentioned, we're talking about, keeping that pollinator pantry full all season long, not just at the beginning of the season. Providing water, providing shelter, and safeguarding habitat. And we're not just talking bees too. We're talking about all sorts of pollinators. So really, in all these cases, you want to think about diversity of food types, diversity of water resources, potentially shelter resources, and the safeguarding habitat. A lot of those practices that we'll talk about apply to protecting a lot of different organisms. So I am going to jump to the next slide if we could. So food, we talk about plants. I know you have some loved plants too. So hopefully at the end of this, I would love to hear what some of your favorite pollinator plants are, because I'm sure you're all gardeners. Some of you may even be entomologists, who knows? I've learned over the years that you might have some really even bigger experts in the audience. So hopefully at the end, we'll have time to talk about favorite plants, but there are countless options out there. One of the things to be considerate of is diverse flower types. Diverse flowers are going to support a diverse population of insects, because flowers have co-evolved with insects. So there are going to be countless insects and wildlife with mouth parts that are specifically shaped for specific types of flowers. Some flowers offer specific rewards that are essential to the diet of certain types of pollinators. And then some don't have any landing pads for certain pollinators. You know, they're more adapted to hosting hovering type pollinators, for example, and vice versa. Some pollinators need a landing pad, so they're going to need a different type of flower. So really having a mix of different flower structures is really, really helpful to be thinking about when you're filling that pollinator food pantry. If you really start looking into flower structures, it just gets wildly fascinating. And I encourage all of you to go out and tear apart flowers this summer. It will just blow your mind. And in the winter time, Google flower structures and fascinating flower structures, because it is truly incredible. One of the ones to look at, if you really want to geek out, is the pitcher plant flower, and looking at the structure of that flower and thinking about how that evolved to be that structure and what the benefits of that structure are. It's really kind of neat. Next slide here. Drew, I lied. This is going to be one of the video ones. We'll cross our fingers that it actually works. But I want to stop for a moment and share a quick little video. It's part of a series that a Bowdoin professor, Matt Wheelwright, and I think Maine Audubon promoted it as well. They created this as, oops, I'm going to stop talking real quick and I'll. I think they do a fantastic job on this video series. I encourage you to check out the Nature Moments series that that Wheelwright produced, and it's a cool book too. And really, it's a really succinct and well-crafted message highlighting the other type of food that a lot of our pollinators need. You didn't see bees in that video, but what you did see were the larval stage of a number of pollinators. So, you know, our moths and butterflies, their larval stages are requiring a host plant to eat the leaves off of host plants. So really thinking about providing plants that will provide that food source. And it's not just any plant. If you look out in your yard in September and late August, you'll see a dramatic difference between the amount of holes that are in our native plant species versus our introduced species that are not native to this area. And there's a reason for that. They have co-evolved with our plant material. So our plant insects that are native to our region are going to be more likely to eat the plants that are native to our region. So we need to keep that in mind when we're selecting plants as well. I'm not a black and white person when it comes to having non-native plants in my landscape. There are plenty of non-native plants that I adore and I really love to have in our demonstration garden, for example, at Rogers Farm. But I do want to emphasize the importance of native plants in this particular setting. There's another thing that I thought that I forgot. So we're going to move on to the next slide here. So we talked about food for our caterpillars, diverse bloom time, diverse bloom shape, but also diverse bloom time, as Sue wisely pointed out. It's really important to make sure that we have flowers at the beginning, middle, and end of the season, and long bloomers as well, ideally. So we have maple flowers that will be here before we know it. A lot of times we don't notice that maples are a flowering tree, but they're an incredibly valuable flowering tree that offer a really important source of pollen and nectar at the beginning of the season. This middle one here is Monarda pustulosa, wild bergamot. It's a really popular flower in our native plant garden at the demonstration garden that we have in Old Town, Rogers Farm. Hopefully all of you can come and visit us this coming season. It's open 7 days a week, and you can just Google us. Maybe I'll put a link to that as well. Hopefully your email will be too full of links. Summer Sweet on the end is one. This is a picture of one in my garden, or my old shade garden, I should say. And it is one of the best smells in a shade garden. I don't know if you've ever, does anyone have Summer Sweet? It's a fantastic late bloomer. It looks dead until about July. It's a fair warning. If you planted it last year, don't tear it out because people oftentimes give up on it. They're like, oh my gosh, it didn't make it over the winter time. It's very, very hardy. I think it's a zone 3 plant, but it does not leave out until very late. It has really fantastic foliage that the picture actually doesn't give it justice, but it's a very deep green, waxy foliage. And again, grows really well in shade. But these are just 3 examples of diverse bloom time. What I'm going to do right now is shift gears and just walk you through, actually, the next slide, I'll give you a quick little story about the native and non-native. This is a little anecdote from our office. I have a native plant arboretum at our office in Bangor, the extension office, right by the airport. And it's a collection of native woody plants, trees, and shrubs that were planted about 20 years ago by my predecessor and his colleague, Marjorie Peranto. They planted it with the intent to see how well different native plants would perform in an urban landscape. And we did end up keeping one token non-native plant, a white lilac on the corner of our building. And a couple summers ago, I pulled in to grab something out of my office and noticed that the white lilac and the cherry, the common choke cherry, were both blooming at the same time. And I watched that cherry for a long time, just was fascinated by the diversity of insects that were just buzzing all around that particular one. And I walked, I think it was 50 feet, not even 50 feet away over to the lilac. Nothing happening there. So, I mean, that's just one example, sunny day, same exposure, full sun, same wide open bloom, but the activity was happening on that choke cherry. And that happens over and over again in our landscape if we stop to pay attention to it. There are many non-natives that will still have pollinator activities. Think about mints, many mints that are not native to Maine are great hosts. But more commonly, this is a good example of why native plants are more valuable. So now I'm going to walk you through some different food sources here, I think. So we want to have at least 3 different types of nectar and pollen food sources each season, at least 4 different types of caterpillar host plants, and a minimum of 9 different types of plants native to the Northeast region. Those are the requirements for certification. May sound like a lot, it may not, but I'll give you some ideas as to some good ones to think about and maybe value a little bit more that are already in your landscape already. So willows, in the case, oh, actually, I wanted to explain the titling of these slides too. So at the bottom, I'm going to give you the botanical name and the common name. When you see SPP, it means that there are multiple species that would be suitable in this group of plants as a food source. So in this case, Salix is the genus for willows, and this is a fantastic early bloomer. What we think of as pussy willows, the little fuzzy buds, are actually an inflorescence, a collection of flowers, which is really mind-blowing for those that have not put them mistakenly in a, if you put them mistakenly in a glass jar with water, you will have seen probably them expand and turn like a greenish color if they were the female flowers, or they turn a yellowish color if they're from a male plant. The plants themselves are either girls or boys. And there's a lot of magic happening, a lot of romance happening at the beginning of the spring when they both expand those little fuzzy buds into those inflorescences. On the main picture here is a picture of a female plant with its collection of female flowers and a pollinator on there. And in my daughter's hand up in the corner is the male flower, a collection of male flowers. So pretty neat to think about that as an early flowering plant. It's very ubiquitous. It's in a lot of our landscapes already. So be on the lookout. It's not necessarily the pussy willow. There's many species of willows out there. So if you're doing some work around the edge of your yard, thinking about hacking back certain things, maybe hold off on cutting back some of those willows, and that can help you towards your certification process too. So go to the next one. This is another early bloomer, and I feel like I'm talking about old friends, so it's kind of fun to see some of you smile knowingly, because I'm guessing that these are probably some of your old friends too. Hobble bush, it gets its name from growing in some cases where it really likes to grow. It grows in a thick mat, not necessarily a low mat, but like in a thick collection colony, and it can be kind of tricky to walk through. But in my experience, it's not too thick, and it really is just a beautiful, graceful shade plant. And what's really especially nice about it is that the white flowers really pop in the shade garden. And at the end of the season, it has these stunning fruits that the wildlife enjoy as well. So it's a nice early one. We'll go to the next one. Red oak. And I will let Doug talk deeply about red oak. Dr. Ptolemy, I should say. I don't know him very well, so I shouldn't refer to him as Doug, but very inspiring stories. I have his book, The Nature of Oaks. I highly, highly recommend that. It's beautiful. It sounds like something only a plant geek would enjoy. It's very well written in nice chunks, seasonal chunks, talking about the ecology of oaks and how incredibly valuable it is. And I personally think that everyone should grow an oak tree from an acorn at some point in their life. So, it's my daughter. Yeah. Everyone should do that. But I should stop to point out that, you know, look down, if you happen to be lucky to have an oak in your yard, look down at the leaves when the snow goes away, and notice how many holes are in the leaves. That's the biggest thing to notice and celebrate, is those holes in those leaves. So I took that when we were waiting at the bus stop, because we were just blown away by how many different shape holes, and some of them were skeletonizers, where they were going in between the different veins of the leaves, and some of them were shot holes, some of them were on the margins of the leaves, and someone was making all of those little holes. So pretty fantastic. Okay, we'll go with the next one, which are violets. Very underutilized ground cover, in my opinion, and a really sturdy one, and super easy to grow in a variety of conditions. It will grow in full sun, it'll grow in not necessarily full shade, but pretty deep shade. And there are a number of different species out there of violets. This happens to be a really common one in my own home garden. a little bit more common than I would have liked. In my early personal gardening journey, I was like, oh, look, they're in seed. I will just help them spread. And I did the lupinating moment where I just like scattered them all over my shade garden, and it did what you would expect. So I have a beautiful weed all through that shade garden, and at this stage in my life, it's not a battle I'm choosing to fight, and I'm fine with that. But it is a great pollinator resource early season. And again, if it's a great ground cover, if you need a space that needs some cover, and especially if it's not a high traffic area, it doesn't take a lot of foot traffic very well, but light foot traffic is absolutely fine. Let's see here. We'll go with the next one. Bush honeysuckle, which honeysuckle, invasive plants, it has a really bad name. So we don't go with common names. The botanical name, Dyervilla lanicera, is the one to look for if you're searching for that to order it somewhere. And this is a lovely early season pale yellow flower. It's more kind of a low shrub, and it will grow very thick in very cruddy soils. So think, along a dirt road, the edge of a dirt road in Maine, early season, you'll notice this. It has a nice fall color. It doesn't look like much the rest of the season, to be honest with you. So it's not like a super showy one for more formal ornamental gardens, but it is a really big host plant for caterpillars, and again, provides pollen and nectar resources. And it's easy to propagate from cuttings too. So if you have a big area that you're trying to kind of address some poor soil quality issues and just put some plants in there, and you're trying to do it on a budget, consider getting this and then taking cuttings and eventually getting those established throughout. And you can suck on the flower to get a taste of the sweet nectar inside. There is something you can enjoy that way. And this one, I think, maybe brings some smiles. Thumbs up. Are you familiar with this Amelanchier? It's a large group of plants, and they readily hybridize. So I'm not sure exactly which species this particular one is. It has many common names: shadbush, Juneberry. Does anybody have another common?
Serviceberry.
Serviceberry. Thank you. I knew I was forgetting one of the big ones. It's in the rose family. It is a fantastic fruit if you can beat the birds to it. So, or actually in my case, we have one in our arboretum at the office, and my first year there, I was going out to get the fruits because I had seen them get pretty close to ripe a week before, and then they were all gone. And then the volunteer that used to take care of it the year before, he was like, "No, they were so great this year." It was the volunteer that had actually birds. So they're very tasty. They're a little seedy, but they're really nice. And again, a great caterpillar resource and an early season source of pollen and nectar. And the main flower here, high bush or low bush blueberry, those have a big bang for their buck because they have the early blooms, great fall color, great winter stem color. I'm talking to people in the mid-coast, so I'm telling you what you already know. Low bush blueberries, high bush blueberries, they're a fantastic plant. And of course, the fruit as well. Win-win-win. For the last early season one, I think it's the last early season one, the Lictrum meadow rue. It is a nice tall plant. Lisa Colburn, I don't know if you've ever had her speak to your group, but she's a fantastic garden writer in Maine. She referred to this as a see-through plant. Comes in a lot of different cultivated varieties. So we were talking about the cultivated variety, but most species within this group are tall and airy. So it being a see-through plant, it gives you some flexibility as to where you can place it in your landscape. You don't necessarily have to follow that strict tall in the back, shorter in the front. You can kind of blend it in and let it seed itself and do itself. Its thing naturally, and not necessarily edit it out of the landscape if it is too tall in a certain area, because it will play well with others. So, and again, in a slightly shaded spot, this white really pops quite well. I see it growing along ditches. It really likes heavier wet soils, but that's not an absolute essential. If you have a more well-drained soil, if you can either mulch it really well or commit to watering it, which I don't like to set people up for that. I like to plant the right plant in the right spot, but it will tolerate more sunny spots with pretty well drained soil too. Jumping to mid. Of course, milkweed. We all like milkweed, but there's more to the common milkweed. There's a lot of different different species out there that are native to our region. Back in 2019, a couple of master gardeners that were involved in our demonstration garden for many years, they always came up with really clever ideas, and they proposed a milkweed demonstration, which I kind of at first thought they were a little crazy, but those are the best gardens sometimes. And it was fantastic to see the diversity within that genus. So we have purple milkweed, butterfly weed, showy milkweed, and swamp milkweed. It's just a few of the ones that perform particularly well. And there are some ones that are not native to our ecoregion that I would hesitate to necessarily use. I would lean on the ones that are native to our region. And when I mention native, I do have a reference that I go by. I use the Go Botany website a lot, and they use the BONAP resources. I think it's a Biota of North America project. They have deeply researched the heritage of different plants, and they have a map showing the native status. So if you're curious as to like a particular species, if you know the name of the plant and put it into the Go Botany website, it'll show you a silhouette of the United States, and in green it'll show you what states it's native to. That's what we use. But we've done a lot of that homework for you in the application itself by listing plants that are native to our region for you to consider. The next one's super funky. It's the buttonbush. And if you enjoy our streams, our freshwater streams in our area a lot in the middle of the summertime, I think of fly fishing. This is when I first came across it out in the wild along the Penobscot River. It's just a wild one to spot because it just looks so different from any other flower. This is like this little white ball is a collection of flowers. They're very tubular shaped, meaning that they're great for butterflies and moths as well as hummingbirds really like it a lot too. It's a long bloomer. It is like the summer sweet in that it looks dead for quite a big part of the season, the beginning of the season. So I'd say mid-June is when it starts to leaf out, so don't give up on it. But finishes really strong. It has these take quite a long time for all the flowers to kind of fully emerge, and they stay open for quite a while, and they take a little while to senesce as well. These are kind of the flowers winding down in the background, and what you see at the end is still this little cool green ball at the end. That's a seed head. And you can do a lot of creative things with this, and I've seen people make boutonnieres out of them, and at the seed heads, and they're a really fun plant. Big pollinator magnet, and also a host plant for caterpillar species as well. It's a pretty big plant too, so if you have a bigger space that you need to fill out, I'd say it gets to be about probably around 8 feet. And 8 feet tall, 8 feet spread, and it propagates really easily too. It's not like that bush honeysuckle. You can take cuttings from it in the late summer and stick them without rooting hormone, and you can get many of those babies to give to your friends.
Does it have a male and female form too, or not?
I think this one is actually a perfect flower, meaning it, but I have
just
to
wondered
double
'cause
check.
mine hasn't flowered yet. So.
Well, males and females will flower.
Mhm.
Males will flower too. You need to have the flowering parts in order for the reproduction to happen. It's probably maybe light would be my guess, or different environmental conditions. Is it in pretty good moisture? Because it needs adequate moisture to really thrive. But, okay. Is it new? A pretty new plant too?
Last year was its second year, but I got it as like a rooted cutting. It wasn't very big to begin with. I was just curious because I hadn't grown it before.
Yeah. It says it's okay for part sun, but I think it does a lot better and more sun as well, too, for sure. My guess is maturity. go with the next one. This is one of my favorite pears at Rogers Farm. The Ratibida, the yellow one here, the Mexican hat, is not native to our ecoregion. It's native to the prairie region. So it wouldn't be on our checklist, but it's a really nice native. But it's with the Monarda fistulosa that I shared with you before. That's a close relative to the bee balm, that bright scarlet red bee balm that we all know and love. And I just think the two together, they bloom at the same time and bloom for a very long period of time. This actually I would call mid to late. I don't know if we officially call it mid to late on our application, but in my experience, they both bloom well into September. And this is usually, I think this is probably taken in July. So they're a really nice pair. And this is another example of the see-through effect. You can see that this actually, the Ratibida seeds itself, and actually the Monarda seeds itself all over the garden. It's easy to edit out, but might be something to consider if you're in a more tidy landscape and you don't want that to happen as well. Good to know that before you call me up and say, why did you recommend that? So the next one is fantastic for a really tough shady site. As you may have inferred, I had a tough shady garden. And so I've navigated those waters for many years, frustrated at first by the lack of options, but then found out what really works well in that site. And this purple flowering raspberry is certainly one of those players. It fills out beautifully. It actually grows really well in full sun as well. I will warn you that it's a magnet for Japanese beetles. So if you happen to have that, that can be a good thing. It could be a trap crop. If you're trying to keep the Japanese beetles away from something that's more high value, it might be something that they go to and you can kind of keep them happy over there. Or even manage them in that area by, just focusing your hand picking efforts on your purple flowering raspberry, and maybe the population will be somewhat more manageable by going in that direction. But
It also spreads really rapidly.
you read the next line in my notes. It will
So
spread.
just with caution, it's a wonderful plant and it is a great pollinator, but
Yeah.
don't plant it next to something that can easily be overwhelmed.
Yeah, and this one's a much harder one to edit out too, because its root system is a woody root system. And so you're really gonna have to get in there and cut it and cut the suckers out, and just know that you're gonna have to do that annually, because it does get crazy. But it creates a nice, like in our native plant garden, it creates a nice wall along the side, which I really like.
But if you have a lot of Japanese honeysuckle in your woods, it would be a good replacement plant for that, because it will spread really quickly. And that's what I'm planning to do in my yard, is to take out the honeysuckle and put that in.
That's awesome. Yeah, that warms my heart. I'm just realizing how the time is flying. Sorry, I get in the whole little zone when I'm talking about plants here. I'm gonna breeze through the next couple as just eye candy for you to consider. Veronicastrum virginicum, the culver's root, another see-through plant, really graceful. And what you couldn't see in there is the tiered leaf structure. The leaves kind of come out in a whirl, and it's really classy looking. When you're looking at it, it's just you have to see it in the field to really appreciate it. But the next ones, I can never remember the pronunciation of the new genus, but Eutrochium, I think it is, Joe Pye weed, very great in heavy wet soils. Next, I think I've got a theme of heavy wet soils. Lobelia cardinalis, really fun in wetter sites. And they bloom at the same time as the next one, which does not make you sneeze. Everyone gives goldenrod the bad rap, but it's the ragweed that blooms at the same time, that's wind pollinated, that gets our allergies really going. So love goldenrod. This is right up there with the red oak as far as their value in the whole grander scheme of things. Smooth aster and things like goldenrod, these late bloomers, they look very weedy and unwanted for most of the season. So into like beginning of August. And we miss the mark as gardeners a lot of times when we're managing our landscapes by weed whacking them out And then we lose all these incredible late season blooms. So number one, especially if you're new to a landscape, trying to do as little as possible to manage those somewhat weedy areas, because you might be surprised at what and you may, not know what you're going to be taking out. Just let things bloom for a full year, take a ton of pictures, and then edit after the fact, unless you know your plants really well and can identify them just from the leaves before they bloom. But that's a really good example of things that people take out and really miss a good opportunity for offering a food source later on. Okay. Clematis, another fantastic one. It's a great, if people are looking for a native vine. This one grows along the rivers, really wet soil, likes really wet soils, but also can tolerate more full sun exposure, sites with well-drained soils if properly mulched. And I've seen this one play really well with bigger trees too. It's not a super, it grows assertively, but not aggressively that it doesn't outcompete. It's structural trees. So I've seen it grow in apple trees. Pretty neat. It's kind of a fun one to see the trees fruiting and then these white flowers in amongst the apples. Kind of a cool one. And the seed heads are really, really fun. I'm going to skip over this one. This one tells the story that I'm going to tell about my own landscape a little bit. So the passive approach to getting all these plants in place, and go to the next slide here. So water, just like any living organism, pollinators need water. And so the certification program really expects that we get some kind of water source in there, at least one, but we encourage folks to consider getting multiple water sources in the area that's being certified. I'm going to show you, so these could be a bird bath, shallow water source, stream, puddling area, and I'll show a picture of what a puddling area looks like in a sec. Natural bodies of water count as well, or more formal water gardens, but you don't necessarily have to go and jump through a lot of hoops. The puddling area on the next slide is super simple. You can get just a shallow tray, like a aluminum lasagna pan, fill it with gravel, and then just commit to topping it off with just a little, enough water to have water in between the rocks, show up in between the rocks. This is a really cool little bird bath that they did, but there's a reason for those rocks. Most pollinators need a landing pad to access that water. So if you think of a bird bath, a lot of pollinators can't just hover over the water and get the water. They need something to land on. So muddy spots, shallow, even like a piece of bark floating in a bird bath, or rocks that kind of pop out of a bird bath. Any of those things are really helpful to improve the access to water. And even watering some plants so that there's, like, if the plants have structures that hold water, I think of like the cup plant, which actually is now invasive, bad example, but there are some plants that have some structures that purposefully hold water, making sure those have some water in them as well. Moving on to next one, shelter. I mentioned earlier that pollinators are incredibly diverse. Well, we need to be thinking about shelter and the diversity of needs in shelter. So in this case, we are asking all certified gardens to have at least 3 of the following shelters. And having 3 to check off seems overwhelming, but if you look at what they are, there's not, it's encouraging people to be lazy is what we're doing. So, making sure that if you have a bare space in your lawn, that it's okay, and to commit to maybe allowing that to happen. It gives you an opportunity to say, hey, it's okay to not fight that battle and try to get grass growing in that area, because those are great for ground nesting bees. Rock walls or rock piles in your area are good for other pollinators. Having dead wood laying around, and that can be really incredibly beautiful. I found a public garden that had some really neat stacks of wood, and you can do it very artfully. And those can create spots for solitary bees to nest in. Bee boxes, of course, those are very trendy and very cool and very easy to do, and come in a variety of shapes and sizes. I just listened to a webinar on bee boxes that was really, really fascinating and very well done. There's a lot of bad advice to be frank, on bee boxes. And this webinar was done by a couple of entomologists that focus their research just on bee boxes and bee hotels. So I highly recommend that. I'll lean on Drew to get that word out, or Drew and team to get that word out on that link. But it's a really fun one and had me all inspired about how to maintain them and how to expand what we have for bee boxes at our demonstration garden. And then lastly, the big trendy thing that a lot of people are aware of now, but I'll echo, is leaving the garden cleanup until spring. That's really, really important. So next slide. If you're having a hard time convincing your neighbors and friends about it, there's some great signage from the Wild Seed Project that you can download from their website. Wild Seed Project is a whole other resource I highly encourage folks to look into. And they sell, I think, this sign as well.
Yeah.
But there's so much life in those leaves. It's really incredible. There are so many different species that overwinter in that leaf litter as different stages. So sometimes they are in the egg stage, caterpillar stage, chrysalis stage, or adult stage. In this case, we have, what is it? A silk moth cocoon over here on a begonia plant in at our demonstration garden at Rogers Farm. Hard to see in the picture, but it looks like a leaf. So there are things that are in your leaf litter that might actually be giant cocoons as well. So just be careful. You may not even want to step in your leaf pile now about this, but it's pretty fascinating to think about all the life that's there and the benefits that could happen if you just leave the leaves behind. And as long as you can. This is just a picture of one of the ground nesting bees. We have over 270 different species of bees in the state of Maine. 270 different species, which is amazing. And there are many of them, many of them are solitary bees that nest either in the ground or in holes in the wood or in hollow stalks out in nature. So making sure that we embrace that diversity of mess and that we oftentimes see as mess and in your own way, in your own level is really important to consider. The next one. This is dead wood. We've got the trend of leave the leaves. I want to get people to really think about leaving some standing dead trees as well. And that's the next battle that I'm hoping to make trendy. This is one of the dead trees in our arboretum. And I actually was literally, this is a couple of years ago, I was walking up to it with a saw during one of our cleanup days, ready to get rid of it. And well-timed reminder, a woodpecker came in and just started chittering away. And it was like everything came together for me, like, oh, you idiot, why are you doing this? Why are you taking this very valuable thing out of our landscape that can really help out a number of different species? There's so much life in standing dead wood. It's really a keystone to the structure of our overall landscape ecology. So look at those dead trees a little bit differently. If they're not in a hazardous spot, really reconsider maybe taking them down or getting them out. Let them linger a little bit longer. Unfortunately, this one's kind of half taken down, not by my own doing, but so we have a semi-snag in our own arboretum landscape. But and again, things like finding a safe spot for some messy piles. It might be that you put them. This is not there anymore, but we tucked this behind another set of trees in the arboretum, and it was out of sight, but still providing a nice little habitat for fledgling birds that were getting out of emerging from our bird boxes and whatnot. So yeah, really important pieces there. And this next one's a picture of a bee box in our arboretum, and you can see signs of nesting here in some of the holes. These are some leaf cutter bees, I believe, that have tucked in their protective vegetation. They put their larvae in there. They put in a little packet of food for their larvae, and then they put in a little enclosure over that little chamber so that they have a little protected spot to develop. And then they do that over and over and over again along the length of these holes. And then they all emerge at the same time. And a number of different species utilize bee boxes. And solitary bees, solitary wasps are the primary users, and don't be fearful of the word wasps. They are just as docile as those solitary bees. They are not aggressive at all. You really have to want to get stung in order to get stung by those, the species that would utilize that. And wasps are important pollinators too, that we really, that's a whole other talk. That'd be one that I would highly recommend. We do mention in the next one, making sure that pesticides are not used in the pollinator friendly certification area. That doesn't necessarily mean that if you have, for example, if you need to manage brown tail moss somewhere in your landscape, that does not necessarily mean that you can't be certified. It's in the area of being certified within your landscape. So, you know, University of Maine Cooperative Extension is a supporter of the proper and prudent use of the pesticides. We're not saying that you can't use pesticides, but this certification is aimed at the top tier spaces that are designed as pollinator friendly. So pesticides have a huge impact, as you all know, on the health of a number of pollinator species. So we really want to celebrate species that are safe for them. Avoiding acquiring invasive ornamental plants, managing those that you can. We're not saying that you have to get them out and have that giant chore done, because that can be very challenging in many landscapes. But to acknowledge that if you have them there, you're making attempts at managing them. And then implementing at least 3 conservation practices. And we're kind of coming up against the time here. I will just run through some of the conservation practices. If we can hop ahead to the no mow May. Yeah. So mowing, leaving clippings behind, soil testing before fertilizing, and tolerating weeds. I get a call all the time about how to get wild strawberry out of their lawn. People want a wild strawberry out of their lawn. I'm like, that's an amazing lawn. Picking wild strawberries out of our neighbor's lawn. So really rethinking weeds, and weeds can be a fantastic lawn. And the next steps, I will jump to, here we go, other conservation practices, you know, water only when necessary, using mulch strategically, and using other water-wise practices such as drip and soaker hoses, and using rainwater as watering resources are all things that will help you move towards getting your space certified. So I'm going to jump to this one for the snowy picture here and show you my landscape. We've been building our house over the past 8 years, 8.5 years, and finally moved in. We've celebrated our 1-year anniversary of moving in on the 1st of the year. And over those 8 years, I've always had these big elaborate plans for this ledgy hillside that our house looks out onto. And then we had kids, and then nothing ever happened because we were having kids and building the house. And so what happened was I had an aha moment when we moved in that following spring, watching certain things emerge and checking off my mental list, my pollinator friendly application, seeing all the things that were already there just because I didn't do anything. And I know everyone comes to this with very different landscapes. This is not what people always have in their front yard. And it takes time for that to evolve. But when you're hearing the dollar signs in your head going, I have to buy this, this, and this, and this, and this in order to do this, it doesn't necessarily have to be purchases. It can be what you don't edit out of your garden that can help you get to that certification process. So my goal is to reevaluate things in the spring, make sure I'm remembering where everything is there, and then see if I can check off that whole plant list by just seeing what's popped up there. And I think I can do it without spending a single cent. We have a wonderful little beaked hazelnut in there. We have goldenrod, we have aster. I could go on a bunchberry, all sorts of fun things, and I didn't have to pay a cent to do that. And I'm not going to water that, that's for sure. And there's a great sledding hill in the middle of it. So, but with that said, I will send you through your team here some links to some additional resources and my contact information if you have any questions. I will share with you the last slide. Big thanks to our pollinator certification committee. This is our current team right now. They are amazing. They spend a lot of time, put a lot of thought into this whole process, and then our photos, big thanks to the folks that helped me with some great photos for this particular one, and our friend Eli's is one of our, I love that picture. Thank you. Making no time for.
Well, we
questions,
can,
sorry.
maybe we can take a couple of questions, and I don't know if anyone, if you want to put questions in the chat, probably do them right now. But is there a question from the audience?
Yeah.
No questions, okay.
Yeah, the area of certification, how large is it?
It can be at any size, pretty much. I mean, thinking about if you have a raised bed,
Well,
Is
I'm
it-
on 3 acres.
you're on 3 acres, it can be a very large area too. As long as it meets those requirements, there's no doesn't have to be a certain percentage of native plants for that.
And apart from being certified with your badge, are there any other results of being certified?
That you can get the sign to celebrate your garden, and we are exploring some additional networking opportunities and professional development, not professional, but development, educational opportunities for folks that are certified, but we haven't gotten there yet with that. We're really trying to get more traction in terms of getting more gardens certified, and then branching out in that direction, because I think it would be a great opportunity to get people connected to more deeper learning experiences for sure.
One more here and then we'll go to the chat.
I wondered if you knew where you could get hobblebush, because I have not been able to find it in the trade.
Ah, that is a good question. Let me grab your contact information and see if I can do some digging. So I haven't seen it in the nursery trade, but there's some things places that come to mind that I haven't looked at either.
Okay. well,
Yeah, one being not too far from
I've been
here.
looking for a couple of years, but I haven't been able to find it in Maine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you checked Rebel Hill? I wonder if they have Rebel Hill.
I
but
haven't
this is
seen.
no
it. I
endorsement
haven't-
necessarily.
I will check there, but I don't think they've had it, so.
Okay. I'd love to grab your contact information. And also I can look at propagation suggestions, because I have a book that would tell me when the best time to take cuttings, or whether if you're interested in going that way.
Yeah.
Because can be surprisingly simple for certain species. I don't know on that one right off the bat.
So let's take 2 questions that are in the chat, and then before I forget and Kate forgets, there are some evaluation forms that are up here on the front desk, and she would really appreciate if you fill them in, because
Why don't
they're
you
a
give it to me? I'll
requirement or
start
some of
handing
our
them out.
funding
These are two
to
different
have every talk evaluated. So in the chat, we have a question from Mary Davis. What are the key differences between the certification program at Maine and Waldo Soil and Water?
I am not familiar with the one at Waldo Soil and Water District. I didn't know if they had a certain certification, or maybe they might be promoting our program through their network.
No, they have their own,
They have their own.
but it's very similar.
Okay. It sounds like it's very similar, so I can't speak more than that on that one.
And then, is it okay to use tick spray?
In the certified area, no pesticide use at all. In the
So I
area
think
being
one point
certified.
I would like to make is that you don't have to have your whole property certified. So, I mean, what I did was I just took a piece of my property and got it certified, because other parts like orchard and, vegetable gardens and other things.
Things that are beneficial to pollinator gardens.
Is there any other questions in the chat?
I'm very interested in learning how to propagate hobblebush.
I'm with you, Liz. I will loop you in. I know this very well. So I'll copy on the email that I send after I do that research.
So I think we should
So we
probably
need on this.
do an end.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you
Brian.
very, very much for a great talk.
That makes sense, honey.
Well, we lost
And
the
for everyone,
audio and then
we have a meeting
I
that
never
starts
did
at 1:30.
my microphone, which you're supposed to do ahead of time.